Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Welcome back to the Buckeye Extra football podcast. This is Joey Kaufman. I'm joined by Bill Rabinowitz and Rob Oller. We are back from State College, back from as important a trip for the Buckeyes as they've had in 2024. They get a much-needed win at Penn State. Fellas, certainly a lot transpired over the weekend in Pennsylvania. Let's break it down.
Let's get this out of the way. This is the most important thing. It only took us about 25 minutes to find our car after the game, not 2 hours.
This is true. We knew what lot we were in. We knew we hadn't gotten it away.
We knew
we just couldn't.
We were close. We only had to push the button on the fob about 40 times this time instead of 400 to find the car. But we did get out of there in a relatively timely manner and did make it back to Washington, PA at some terrible hour. It wasn't terrible.
It wasn't too bad.
For the uninitiated, Rob is recollecting our last trip to State College 2 years ago, where we parked in a parking lot next to Beaver Stadium, only to find our car towed afterwards. So it was a smoother post-game situation for us this time. Good job all around.
Yeah, and don't forget, it was towed, but we didn't know it was towed for about an hour and a half.
And I learned something this weekend. You don't need sleep. Sleep's overrated. Who needs sleep?
Yeah.
Who do you think got less sleep Friday night, Bill? You, who were just having trouble sleeping in your hotel room, or Ryan Day?
How about James Franklin?
Well, I know the answer. I got less sleep because I got no sleep.
I'm not sure Ryan Day got any sleep.
I know I didn't. I think he did.
Well, maybe he was going to celebrate pretty. He was going to party pretty hardy, I do believe.
Yeah, Saturday.
I'm sure. And on the other side, James Franklin probably got no sleep.
Saturday night.
Right.
Shouldn't have. Adrenaline's a powerful thing, apparently. Because thank God. Anyway, let's talk about the game. It's hard to overstate how important that game was. It didn't mean everything like last year's Ohio State-Michigan game in the sense that the loser was out of the playoff picture. But in terms of the whole trajectory of how people felt about this team and this season, it turns 180 degrees. If they lose to Penn State and, second loss and all the Ryan Day skeptics are out in full force, they have no margin for error the rest of the year. Now they're sitting pretty. They're almost guaranteed to be in the playoff. They're in pretty good position to go to the Big Ten championship game. They proved that they could, make a big stop on defense. They proved that they could run the ball down somebody's throat in a crucial time on offense. So, here we are, seashells and balloons.
I would say it was about 150 degree. I don't think everybody's like suddenly this is what people thought the team would be preseason with all the talent, but it was a big step, small step for the Buckeyes, huge big leap for Ryan Day. How about that? I think it more got people off Ryan Day's back a little bit than Ohio State's.
I think that's fair because the discussion for weeks since the loss to Oregon has centered on Ryan Day's record in big games, his record in top 5 games. And if they had lost Saturday, it would have been 2-7 or 2-8, depending on how you want to compute that stat, with 5 straight losses to top 5 teams. And that would have been a hard thing for them to take and carry on. They just needed a jolt of good news. And I felt you could really sense it from Ryan Day afterward, just the relief kind of oozing from him to finally get a win. And not finally, but the first in 2 years since Notre Dame in the season opener in 22. So this was certainly a big step forward for him, and just sort of injects some much needed enthusiasm, mood boosting energy around the Buckeyes.
Thank God for Penn State. I mean, if you're Ohio State, thank God that Penn State is in the conference, because they're good enough that it's a quality win when you beat them. It's always a quality win, and they're good enough to test you and test your mettle. But for whatever reason, whether it's Ohio State's overall superiority, whether it's James Franklin choking in the big games, whatever it might be, Ohio State finds a way to win it. And so it's always like this big salve for the season for Ohio State. They beat Penn State, and that's a springboard for them. And they've obviously had difficulty with Michigan in recent years, but Penn State's the one they can count on. There's our quality win.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's Penn State. It's like, I think I wrote it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah,
Penn State. It's like Puxatawny James Franklin. He just the same thing over and over and over and over. And Penn State, I read, everyone says this, and it's true. I think it was former Buckeye. I can't remember which former Buckeyes. Chimdy maybe said, they're like a tier 2 team or a tier 1A team. I don't know exactly how I put it. They're just not. Joey, I don't know if he wants his public, but I'll spill the beans. I think Joey was saying on the car ride home, I think it was Joey. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's going to be very hard for Penn State to win a national title. Not that it can't happen, but they've got some things not in their favor. Location, although I guess you could argue that both ways. For those who want to go there, it's a destination.
It's in the middle of a cow pasture, in the middle of Pennsylvania. We literally drove through a cow pasture to park in the stadium. There were cows there. I mean,
it smelled.
Yeah, and you could smell. It's just not. It's not Penn State. I mean, for most Big Ten schools, you are not really all that close to premier talent. You are not in the South, and you need to go win recruiting battles in the South to win it. So they're a little locked. I think tier 2 is a fair way to describe it. They're good enough to be a quality win for Ohio State, but they're not going to really be a perennial threat in the truest sense of the word, where they're going to split the games with Ohio State or win the Big Ten or win national titles. They just kind of are who they are for Ohio State. It's perfect for them. It's perfect for the Buckeyes. It was certainly the ideal opponent to face. Good enough to get credit for the win, and also I think just sort of escape.
I remember when Penn State, and this is an Ohio State podcast, but since we're dumping on Penn State, I remember when Penn State was the darling of the media because Joe Paterno, before things got very messy there with Joe Pa, but the East Coast media, the New York media, the Philly media. I mean, Penn State was the darling of, and now I think part of it is going all the way back to when they joined the Big Ten. They kind of lost that East Coast mystique, if you will. I guess it might be like if Notre Dame joined a conference somewhat, but they were kind of loved, and they were very good, and they were playing in the Big East. So it was
like a long time.
Yeah, they were independent, and so they kind of could get by looking better than maybe they were, although I don't know. I just think that tier 2 is accurate, Joey, and they're just so close. I mean, look at the rest of their schedule. Now, they may have a little challenge at Minnesota, but, I mean, they should win out.
Yeah, and they're probably going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be 11-1.
11-1 with a loss to Ohio State. They're in. There's no doubt.
Yeah, right. That said, I guess this proves our point that this was a big win for Ohio State.
Let's kind of dive a little deeper into the game, I guess. I mean, Ohio State really could have won this very comfortably. If not for Will Howard throwing an early pick 6 and then fumbling the ball to negate a touchdown, that's 14 points right there. Ohio State's defense did a really nice job on Penn State's offense, kept them out of the end zone the whole game, obviously. There were 2 deep balls that could have been touchdowns. One was a bad throw by Will Howard, and the other was, I don't know why Jeremiah Smith paused, but he did, and the ball was a couple yards overthrown only because he paused. Those are like 4 scoring plays there. It could have been a very dominant performance, but it wasn't, and that's kind of the thing about Ohio State this year. They're an enigma in certain ways because you can see if they put it all together, boy, oh boy, they're going to be tough to beat. But they just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, but I also don't think they were expected to go into this game with a dominant performance. I mean, all 3 of us picked Penn State to.
I know, but they could have. That's my point.
I wouldn't have said it was even if they convert that stuff, I'm not sure that would have been dominant. But I guess if you complete both those deep balls, yeah.
Well,
He doesn't fumble the ball. It's a touchdown instead of a touchback.
I think they were pretty dominant defensively. Offensively, I see. I never prescribed to the, if they hadn't thrown the pick six, if they hadn't fumbled, they did. You can play that both ways. If Penn State doesn't jump off sides and have a taunting.
That was the dumbest play of the game.
Well, I'm just saying, the finals 20-13, hard fought, and I think Joey wrote this, Bill did too. The two areas, really the three areas that have cost them in the past against big top five teams was the offense couldn't seal the deal at the end of games, and the defense second half and even specifically fourth quarter would always allow that touchdown or that score. They couldn't get off the field. And then the third thing was explosive plays, which, kind of, if you have a lot of explosive plays, you're going to lose that game. So, and I think they were 3 for 3 in those areas of not allowing explosive plays, at least not a lot. I don't know how many there were. Joey's usually the stat man. He knows. I don't know if he does on this one, but
I think Penn State had 2 pass plays of 20 yards or more.
Yeah, I mean that's if you're under 3, if you're 3 or under 3, I think you're pretty good. The defense made the goal line stand with some help from pretty spotty, shaky play calling on Penn State's part. Ran up the gut 3 straight times and tried to force a pass in. And Caleb Downs made a great play on that. I'm not sure it's completed anyhow, but he his coverage was tight. And then the offense runs 10 straight runs from their own 1 yard line, and then a kneel down for the 11th, and just put put it to Penn State by running the ball every time. That's what they haven't been able to do in the past, and they did it. So my takeaway from the whole thing is that was the thing that has to make Ryan Day more pleased than anything.
And I think that's got to make a lot of the fan base happy with Ryan Day in this team, was not only did you get the win at Penn State, but you won in a style that I think is very endearing, because you get the goal line stand, and whether Penn State's play calling was creative or not, they had the ball on the 3 yard line. He had 4 plays to get 3 yards, couldn't get more than 2. And for the defense to get a goal line stand like that for the third straight game in a critical moment, I think was inspiring. And then they get the ball back at the 1 yard line and just bleed the clock by running the ball every single time. And I think what's been so brutal about some of the Ohio State's losses in Big Ten games, especially the ones against Michigan, is just this feeling in the fourth quarter of these games where just watching the other team sort of will itself at the line of scrimmage against you. That when they lost to Michigan last year, Michigan had a 7-minute drive in the fourth quarter, and Jim Knowles' defense couldn't get off the field. And in this case, Penn State's defense couldn't get your offense off the field because you just kind of kept bludgeoning them up front and getting those yards on third and short. Quinshon Judkins had a great block. Even the running backs were blocking on when Will Howard ran on that 3rd and 2 play, being able to convert on 3rd and short. I mean, I think that if you are just an old school football guy at heart, that last fourth quarter just had to make you blush.
I don't have to. You got it. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's like
thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We have nothing to add. Penn State's an elixir for Ohio State. I think Ralph Russo wrote that. That was his lead for his.
Yeah. Now, okay. So a nitpick, because it's Ohio State, and you can't be Ohio State without nitpicking a little bit. Will Howard. Yeah. Good runs, ran hard. Some of that, I think, is play calling helped him out. I mean, he's an effective runner.
We should say Chip Kelly called a great game.
Oh, Chip Kelly called a great game. Yeah,
touchdown pass.
Earned his millions. Not to focus on salary. Some people will be upset with that, but earned some of his millions. I'm not sure you can earn your $2 million in one game, but maybe you earn half a million in that game. But Will Howard throws a bad pick, almost throws another one. I think that people forget about
another
that.
Swing pass they could have gotten.
Another swing pass. Misses badly on the Cornell Tate. And really, I thought maybe his best deep ball of the season was to Jeremiah Smith when Jeremiah Smith sort of, stutter stepped and it looked like the ball was overthrown. It really was thrown right on track. And Smith, you kind of put that one on Jeremiah Smith. We debated whether Jeremiah Smith kind of slow up because he knew that the deep ball has been underthrown all season. So he was kind of outrunning Will Howard's arm, and it turned out not to be the case. That said, I think Will Howard, again, showed I don't know what you want to call it, the patience, the calmness. He doesn't get rattled. I think that's important. He does not seem to get rattled. Now, you can not get rattled all you want, and if you throw pick sixes, who cares? Get rattled and don't throw pick sixes. That's what I'd be my thing. But again, I have belabored this. I don't know if you guys have, but he's 90% what you need at a quarterback, and that 10% just can't be disastrous. The 10% that's not what you need can't be. It needs to be just meh, not bleh. And
there were two disastrous plays. I mean, there's no question.
Right. And the one actually, the fumble is a disaster, but that was kind of a quirky thing.
That was a good play by the defensive player. It happens. But when you're near the goal line and you're the quarterback and you've already gotten the first down, I think it's at 13, so it's going to be worst case scenario, first and goal at the 1 or whatever. Two hands on the ball. You just have to make sure that no matter what, you don't fumble that ball.
That's fair.
You have to make sure.
That's fair. It was also interesting, maybe poetic justice, even though I don't think maybe it was even the right decision. When he slid down on the very last play, he could have scored. Yeah, I think he could have scored, and he slid down. I don't know if he thought, well, that'll run more clock out, but I think it would have run the clock. It wouldn't have mattered.
I think what he thought was the right. There's no risk. Was the right move.
If you go down, there's zero risk.
I'm not saying it was a wrong move. I'm not saying it was the wrong move. I'm saying he could have scored.
Yeah. It was unquestionably the right move.
I'm not even sure But why did he do? I'd like to know, why did he do it? Did he do it because he knew it was the right move, or did he just kind of?
Yeah, he knows what the situation is.
Yeah,
he knew what to do.
Well, he didn't. He didn't against Oregon. So
yeah, because if you keep running, you run the risk of somebody catching you from behind and yanking the ball out if you score.
Right. I know. Let's just say this. All right, I'll take it back and just say this. I think he could have scored. That's all.
Oh yeah. It was interesting. We talked about the pick six. His mindset of this game, I mean, he was really juiced up. You could tell it from the end of the Nebraska game where he talked about they didn't recruit him out of high school. He talked to Bill earlier this season about still feeling salty from that. Maybe he came out too hot. The flip side of that is it definitely felt like he was willing them at times and certainly had some intensity about him when he was running the ball in the fourth quarter. So that felt like almost a double-edged sword at times, maybe a little too amped up. But on the other hand, he brought a lot of juice in the fourth quarter when they really needed him to carry him.
And Bill said something, we've been, again, harping on all season, that feels like we're picking on him. But I guess when you're the quarterback, it might be the most high-profile position in any sport in Ohio sports. Like, you got Bengals-Browns quarterback, but I mean, this is Ohio State. Is that he tends to lock on to receivers a little too much. Again, like nobody's perfect. Nobody expects Will Howard to be perfect. But these are some things, in the next 2 weeks, when as much of gimme games as you're going to find, Purdue, Northwestern, although the Northwestern game's interesting because it's at Wrigley. This is a chance for Will Howard to work on some of this. Now, coaches will tell you we're past that. That's for spring ball. That's for preseason. Once you get into the season, you're not really working on the little finer details. So we'll see. But you just wonder if, again, moving ahead, is it going to cost him? I don't know.
Look, we entered the season thinking the offensive line and the quarterback were going to be the questions that would determine the success of the season. And here we are 8 games in, and that's where we are. That's still where we are. Is it 8 games or 9 games? I can't even keep this stuff straight. 7-1? Yeah, okay. So let's talk about the offensive line a little bit. That was the other big storyline. They obviously Josh Simmons is out for the year. Terrible injury. Zen Michalski plays last week against Nebraska, does not play well, then gets hurt himself. So they are at plan C, and plan C was to move Donovan Jackson from left guard to left tackle and move Carson Hinsman, who was last year's center, to left guard. Carson Hinsman's been basically a forgotten guy all year. Seth McLaughlin came in, became the center, transferred from Alabama, and we heard Luke Montgomery. We didn't even hear his name for a while. But I thought he played well. As Ryan Day said, I didn't notice him, and if you're a guard, that's a good thing. Donovan Jackson got beat twice by Abdul Carter, but Abdul Carter is a star player. I kind of cut him some slack. I think Ohio State needs, against very good edge rushers, to give Donovan Jackson some help with a tight end or running back, whatever. Ohio State's running backs, Travion Anderson and Quinshon Judkins, are terrific blockers. I mean, they like to inflict some pain. So you need to be able to use those guys. I don't think Abdul Carter and Donovan Jackson one-on-one on the edge is a fair matchup for Donovan. But I thought overall he played well. Certainly, first time playing there since high school. Played well. I assume that's going to be the way they're going to stay. I can't imagine they're going to switch it at this point, although we'll get confirmation tomorrow, I assume. I thought that was a step forward. Now, if they have to play somebody like Georgia, with a dominant defensive line, we'll revisit this. But I think that was a very good first step for this reconstituted offensive line.
You know what the lesson there is?
What's that?
Kid? The lesson, kids, is sometimes going to your plan C is better than going to your plan B.
Well, that may be.
Jump right to plan C sometimes.
Well, the question I have really, and when you think about this offensive line, is why wasn't this plan B in the first place? Because the only reason they started Jackson a left tackle and Carson Hinsman a left guard at Penn State was because Zen Michalski got hurt. And maybe when they evaluated his performance against Nebraska, and Ryan Day acknowledged that Zen did not grade all that highly in that game, maybe he would have made this move anyway. But I think what we saw out of the left side of the offensive line against Nebraska really made you wonder why that was the first option instead of this one. Because this was like maybe you're not as strong at left tackle. Maybe there are going to be some times where Donovan Jackson in a third and long against a terrific pass rusher like Abdul Carter may put you in a tough spot. But I thought Carson Hinsman held up well, and they ran the ball to that side well too. So that feels like the better option. And we don't know 100% if that's what they'll go with moving forward. I would think so. But Zen Michalski figures to return at some point. But it's hard to believe you would not kind of keep building on this performance from what we saw Saturday.
Joey, you touched on something that's always bugged me. What does Zen think? You got to believe that the coaches thought Zen in practice was the guy. If he's not the guy in practice, they're not playing him. And I have maintained, and Bill, we've all seen a lot of football, a lot of sports. I totally maintain there are practice guys and there are game guys, and they don't always make the transition well. And it was Zen's first game, amped up, did not play well. The adrenaline gets going. Some guys are gamers, and coaches don't like to hear that. It's like, it's practice, it's practice, it's practice. You play like you practice. Well, not everyone does. And I just think that, why did Zen get the start? Why was Zen the guy? Because Zen probably practiced pretty well, or the other guys didn't practice maybe great. I don't know. But then you get in the games, and that's scoreboard. And Zen didn't get it done. Feel bad for the guy injured, but he didn't get it done in that game. And I thought that Hinsman was capable, was adequate, more than adequate. So I don't know. And then you got the whole thing of Hinsman was a little bit in the doghouse. I don't know how that works out. You just never know. That's the insider stuff that we don't know. We went on that podcast, a year ago? I don't think that's a holdover, but the problem with stuff like that is once you sort of lose a half a step because of something you did or didn't do, making that up sometimes can be challenging, especially if you're not a super practice player. This is all speculation. I'm putting it out there. It's just all speculation, but it's always bugged me that, it's how you practice. It's how you practice. I get it. What else are you going to go by? Well, sometimes the great coaches sort of know that okay, this guy isn't maybe a great practice player, but something happens in the game and he steps up. So that my soliloquy,
The other consideration they had to make with the line was this move required them moving two guys out of position, where maybe with Zen Michalski, you hoped that you could only deal with one transitional left tackle. You keep left guard the same. But now you had two starters. You were injecting a fair bit of uncertainty because you didn't know how Carson Hinsman, a center, would play left guard. You didn't know how left guard Donovan Jackson would play left tackle. He said he hadn't played that position since high school. So it's the issue of having two guys out of position versus keeping some continuity. But I think the starting experience showed up, which was why Carson ultimately got the nod. Was he had started 12 games at center last year, and he had played in some tough environments at Notre Dame and at Michigan last year. Played against Penn State last year at the Horseshoe. So that was a reason for getting the nod over Austin Sareveld and Luke Montgomery, who were the other candidates.
I just can't see Ryan Day switching now. I just don't see it happening, even if Zen is healthy. I just don't. I mean, why would you? Unless Donovan on tape or says, "Look, I'm a guard." I don't think he'll do that. I think he's perfectly happy to play tackle. But
yeah, he seemed like it.
There's a comfort factor with him.
And you have a big opportunity here moving forward to get him to acclimate more at left tackle. You're playing
2 games here,
playing Northwestern, and then you have Indiana and Michigan. So you have some runway to settle in a bit. I would think they would not change it, but that's why we'll ask and try to get some clarity on that situation Tuesday. I do think we touched on Chip Kelly's play calling. I thought he did a nice job trying to deal with some of the uncertainty at that offensive line, because you saw some design rollouts with Will Howard, that really pretty throwback touchdown they had on the second drive after the interception, where they have him roll out and then throw back to the other side to Emeka Egbuka going down the other side of the field. It seemed like they had some options and some speed options where they were getting him in space quickly. So some of the fakes, it felt like they were moving Will Howard around a fair bit to compensate for that loss. I thought that was a well-called game. Versus at Nebraska, didn't feel like they dressed it up the same, or they didn't have the same number of wrinkles against Nebraska, where you just kind of had Will Howard straight in the pocket a little more by moving him around. It probably helped to mitigate some of those line issues. But yeah.
Well, don't forget too that Chip Kelly, and they said that Nebraska kind of offered a different look, a different front. It's almost like Nebraska is not as talented necessarily as Penn State, but this gets into into scheme, and Nebraska's defensive setup maybe was a little more challenging for Ohio State, whereas Penn State was just a straight up matchup. And I think the thing, if I just close my eyes and think about this, I just think those 10 straight runs, to seal the game, that might be the boost that this team needed or needs. The guys ran hard. Judkins, Henderson, Will Howard. I was thinking, of all his QB sneaks, what is he, like 4 or 5 this year, or more than that maybe?
He's really good. He's big. He's got strong legs. Obviously, he's 235 pounds. I tell you what, that's a huge difference in this offense from the last couple of years, when 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2, you go, oh man, it seems like it's 50-50. With Will Howard under center, you figure it's pretty much a given. That's a huge thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was huge. I mean, the 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 on that last drive, and then you had there was a 4th and 1 sneak earlier in the game too that they were able to get him on. I'm with you. It's a big advantage. Will thought they were averaging maybe like 5 yards a carry on those sneaks.
Maybe Urban Meyer was right.
They did. He did run 9 times. He didn't run 15 to 20 that Urban did, but he had 9 scrambles or design runs, and then he had 3 sacks, so 12 carries total. But they did run him more this game against Penn State.
How about Penn State?
We've belabored Penn State. We don't need to pick on Penn State.
I will say,
do you remember? I mean, I got to have a little fun here. That reminded me of who was the guy years ago in the middle of the broadcast? It was a college game, and says, "What do you think of what was Oh my
It
gosh.
was Mike Patrick where he was on ESPN. He's like, "What do you think Britney's doing?" He's in front of Britney.
Yeah, what do you think Britney's doing right now? Britney Spears. And I think he was on with Blackledge, right?
I believe so.
Brittany who? I mean, it was just random. So that's what do you think of Penn State?
Well, Penn State got random. They were the opponent.
Well, okay. Failed
They're
job.
the third or fourth best team in the Big Ten. Like they always are.
Well, here's a nutshell. Brian White, shout out to Brian White, our editor. He had a little blurb that Penn State's best receiver was its leading running back, and Penn State's leading running back on the season was its best receiver in that game. That, to me, sums up Penn State. They just can't quite get it right, at least against Ohio State.
That's why I'm not.
We've come full circle here. We started out with Penn State. We end with Penn State.
And I think Penn State's limitations as a receiver is why I would be careful not to maybe overstate the defensive performance. And look, I think they deserve a ton of credit and respect for holding Penn State without a touchdown. The goal line stand. The Nittany Lions had the ball twice inside the 3-yard line, came away with no points. So not to disparage the defense, really. But this is not a game where it's going to be similar to Oregon. They don't have the athletes at wide receiver that Oregon has. So if you're thinking of trying to project Ohio State down the line and it's secondary against the Oregons or Texas or Tennessee in a playoff scenario, I still would like to see how these DBs would hold up.
And to me, that's the question. That's a great point, Joey. To me, that's still why, Bill says, can you imagine if they put it together? Well, it's like, I don't know what has to happen. The planets need to align, for that to happen, maybe, because I'm still not convinced that Jim Knowles' secondary against an Oregon or, whether a Georgia or a Texas and the teams, Miami, can hold up. I mean, Penn State is limited on offense. So, but, that's looking at the glass half empty. The glass half to more full is they did what they needed to do. Tough environment.
We'll see.
And they control their own destiny. They're back to controlling their own destiny.
The other thing is, this is the last hostile environment they're going to play in this year. Any other game is going to be no worse than a neutral site.
They could have a road first round playoff game.
Yeah, okay, fine. I think that's very unlikely, but whatever. I mean, yeah, in theory they could. But the Northwestern game, there'll be more Ohio State fans at Wrigley Field than Northwestern fans. Mm-hmm. And if they play Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, there'll be more Ohio State fans there than Oregon fans, I would think. And obviously Ohio State travels well on wherever bowl they go to, whatever playoff game. So it certainly won't be like Oregon or Penn State. That was the last time.
Yeah, they will not play in any place probably more hostile because you have the possibility of a first round playoff game. The semifinals are at the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl, so it's theoretically possible you could face Texas in the Cotton Bowl, and then maybe it's a case
or Georgia in Atlanta, right?
Right,
or Miami in the Orange,
right. So there's some of those situations, but I don't think that's quite the same deal as playing at Autzen or at Beaver Stadium.
Right. So,
I mean, think about this: if it is an Ohio State-Oregon game in the Big Ten championship game, Oregon's already in. Ohio State probably is also. You're playing for a seed at that point, and like how up is Oregon going to be for that game? It's going to get
a bye. That's a huge thing. If you win the Big Ten championship, you get a bye. It's a huge thing.
I know. Well, yeah, sometimes. Keep it going if you're rolling. I know in football, you want that bye, you rest guys.
You want the bye.
That's a big thing.
The other thing,
I'm just saying, I don't know how much Oregon, at a neutral site, how much they would be up for that. They'll be up for it, but it's not like it was at outs.
Win the Big Ten championship at the first year in the league, that'd be huge for them. The other thing is, this could be, Joey and I talked about this yesterday. This could be, Ohio State and Oregon could play 2 more times. They could play in the Big Ten championship game, and you figure the loser of that game, the winner of that game is probably going to be the number 1 overall seed. The loser of that game is probably going to be the number 5 seed, and they would meet again in the semifinals if both won. I'm not saying that's a a likely scenario, but
Let's
it's
hope
certainly
not.
a real one.
Yeah, I don't think that's not good for it. That's not good for anybody.
No, I agree. I don't want to see that either. I think 3 times in a season's crazy. But that's what, and maybe they'll kind of wink, wink, let's make Oregon or Ohio State the 6th seed, right? I mean, maybe they'll do that. But maybe make one of the SEC runner-up the 5 seed. But and that's fine. I hope they do, because I don't want to see well, I guess they could meet the finals, Then, I mean, if they're both in the playoff, they can meet at some point, obviously. So it is certainly possible they could play 3 times in a season.
We will see. We'll get a glimpse of maybe how the selection committee is thinking about these teams Tuesday night when they reveal the first college football playoff rankings. We'll touch on that later this week when we also preview Ohio State's upcoming game against Purdue at the Horseshoe Saturday noon game on Fox. But that was just about it for recapping Ohio State and Penn State. The Buckeyes get a signature win in Happy Valley, look even more likely to make the college football playoff, remain in the thick of the Big Ten championship game hunt. That was Bill Rabinowitz, Rob Oller, and Joey Kaufman. Thanks for joining us and listening to us on the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.